Whenever you see the name Brindley in the Midlands, like Brindley Place, Brindley Avenue, the Brindley Pub, there's a very good reason for it. Without James Brindley, the man and his ingenuity, there'd probably be very few people actually living in the Midlands. The Brindley Lock and the canals that it made possible really are a crucial part of the history of the world. It's 1750 and industrialisation looks set to make Middle England rich. A workforce skilled across 1,000 trades needs a cheap, reliable transport system to export to the world.
If you're going to design an industrial town from scratch, you wouldn't produce it in Birmingham because it doesn't have a river. It's a long way from potential markets.
If only a network of canals could be built to cross the country and link north with south. But the idea is ridiculed. For many Brummies, the idea of backing the new canal systems was about as likely as turkeys voting for Christmas. And how do you get canal boats up and down the hills of the Midlands?
The nation has to want a transport system. It has to realise that the industrialisation is being held up by not being able to transport things in and out.
One object made the building of a canal network seem affordable. This is it, the Brindley Lock. And this is the story of how it opened the Midlands to the world. Now, I lived and worked in Birmingham and the West Midlands for years. I'm a kind of honorary Brummie, even though I was actually born in the south. I love the place. I always took it for granted that Birmingham was a massive, busy city. Lots of the other towns around were very busy, bustling places. But in 1750, Birmingham was actually quite a tiny little town, and the places around it were even smaller. But the people were always incredibly industrious, resourceful, and very energetic. So how could they make their area bigger, busier, and themselves richer? Motorways were still 250 years away. Nobody had heard of spaghetti, let alone Spaghetti Junction. Industrial growth was taking off all over Britain, but not necessarily in the Midlands. Living in the middle of the 18th century in this part of the world was like living in a beautiful rustic backwater. And you might think, how lovely. But the population was growing and people needed jobs. Without a transport system, Birmingham and the market towns that surrounded it were in grave danger of becoming footnotes in the history of England. Before the canals arrived, the whole canal system arrived, how did they get goods to here? How did they export them? What did they use? Because there were no rivers.
Well, no navigable rivers. There was reliance upon roads and a reliance upon pack horses. Now, during the 18th century, the period, if you like, of the classic industrial revolution, the growth of Birmingham accelerated rapidly as Birmingham grew and put greater pressure on the supply of raw materials from the Black Country and the export of goods beyond its boundaries, then road traffic was insufficient. Canals promised a new way of moving goods, particularly the heavy goods that Birmingham was producing, bringing coal in from the Black Country, bringing iron ore in, bringing silver in, and enabling products to be exported, which could not be properly exported by pack horse or by cart.
Meetings of 18th century think tanks recognised the technical problems to be overcome before a canal network could be built. What were the hardest difficulties they had to overcome? Not politically, but actually physically digging the canals.
They had to engineer off the land. They've got to find everything that they want. I mean, you've got to find clay for bricks, If you want to find stone, then where is it? You've got to have coal for the kilns to make the bricks. You've got to have timber for scaffolding and making your lock gates. Now, if you could transport these many distances to your work camps, you wouldn't need a canal in the first place. You'd have the transport system.
Digging millions of tons of earth wasn't going to be cheap for what the canal visionary James Brindley had in mind. He was born in Derbyshire, the son of Quaker parents. He was fascinated by engineering. His first venture was designing watermills. He became an acknowledged expert. The idea that water could facilitate industrial growth became his life's mission. He was an amazing man, wasn't he? What sort of man was he?
He was a man of integrity. I mean, he was a very good engineer. He could lucidly explain these newfangled canals that people were being asked to invest in. And they had to have somebody trustworthy. They didn't want anybody flashy. They didn't want anybody sort of promising the earth. They wanted somebody to say, yes, you're not wasting your money if you put it in this. Brindley was the figurehead. He was the one who convinced people this is not pie in the sky. We can really do this.
To unlock the Midlands, he wanted to join the four main English rivers, the Trent, the Mersey, the Severn and the Thames, via a grand cross through the heart of England. But a vision is one thing, digging canals is another, and someone had to pay for it. The first man in the Midlands to back Brindley was Josiah Wedgwood, the man whose china products were so easily breakable. The problem is best shown by this, Wedgwood china. It breaks when dropped. It also breaks when it travels in a cart on a bumpy road. He wanted a canal urgently, but he also wanted it to be affordable. At the heart of the plan, hatched by the pair in the Leopard Pub Burslem in North Staffordshire, was keeping costs down. Brindley was an engineer with money on his mind, and time spent digging was bad for business. Things were made worse by the tools that the canal builders, or navvies as they became known, had to use. This is an 18th century earth mover or shovel, and thousands of men had to move millions of tons of earth with them. Brindley decided to shovel less earth and fill the new canal with as little water as possible. He built tunnels like the one at Harecastle in Staffordshire to cut the length of the canal down. I don't have to do this, you know. I'm a fabulously wealthy man. However, for the sake of my art, I am demonstrating the ancient technology of legging, which is actually the best way that they used to get through the tunnels on the old canal network. And as you can see, it's all going really badly. Come on, Nigel, do something.
Oh, pushing me back.
You're a waste of space.
Just making it look easy.
Oh, come on. I'm doing all the legwork here, come on. Brindley made the tunnel as narrow as possible. Again, less to dig and less water needed to fill it. And he devised a way to help boats get up and down the steep Midlands gradients. The narrow Brindley-Lock, which was to be the key to the success of the first part of his Grand Cross. One of the great things about the Brindley-Lock is that it's incredibly narrow. They're only 7'6" from one side to another. It was 70 feet long, so enabling long, thin boats to carry up to 30 tons safely and for long distances. A succession or flight of locks meant canal boats could go up and down hills. The design of a Brindley lock made canal building affordable.
I mean, some people were saying, if you're going to build a canal, why don't you build it wide enough to have these big boats that are on the rivers? then you've not got to transship it at that end and at that end. Wow, I mean, to build a canal, double the width that we've got, to take big boats, double the depth. Well, I mean, there just isn't the finances to do that, let alone fill it and be able to build it. I mean, it just wasn't possible. It's the narrowness of them that makes it feasible that they could get this whole scheme off the ground.
Brindley and Josiah Wedgwood completed the first canal from the Midlands, linking the Trent with the Mersey via the so-called Grand Trunk. And all along it were brindley-locks. The waterway created an economic boom in the potteries. Special clay to create white china could now be brought cheaply by canal from Liverpool, processed in Wedgwood's now giant manufactory, and then shipped throughout the world via canal. Thousands of workers were employed in a bustling environment like nowhere else on Earth. One which lasted for 2 centuries and created work for generations. Other local business would eventually thrive alongside the giant ceramics plant. Coal mined in the Black Country was brought, again by canal, to fuel the new steam engines. At this bone-crushing mill, just 600 yards down the canal from the manufactory, animal bone was imported from farms and prepared for bone china. Jessie Shirley's bone and flint mill, now the Etruria Industrial Museum, provides a perfect picture of how the new canal-enabled industry helped provide employment and create wealth. Iron was needed for the engines. Coal brought by canal was used to stoke the fires and create the steam needed to fuel the mechanism. The massive machine turned the wheels that ground the bone into dust before the bags of bone were transported to a small canal cut built off the Grand Trunk. The boats would travel the short distance to the Wedgwood factory. Today, enthusiasts keep alive the sights and sounds of a wealth-creating mill inherently linked to Brindley's engineering skills and Wedgwood's commercial nous. The word was out. Brindley's lock meant narrow canals could be built more cheaply than anyone thought possible. His vision was beginning to capture the imagination. The owners of coal and iron ore mines invested in the next canal Brindley was to engineer, the Staff's Worcester, which would provide a link through the Black Country to the mighty Severn, and so to the sea via Gloucester and Bristol. One simple fact that demonstrates the financial viability of moving freight by canal is that a horse like William here can carry 60 times as much pulling a canal boat as he could pulling a cart. Okay, William, off you go.
When it came to the movement of large bulk goods, canals really came into their own. Canals weren't about speed, of course. It was about the movement of bulk goods cheaply. And of course that had particular importance for the Black Country, which was really based on the mining of coal and the production of iron, 2 large, difficult items to move around cheaply. And they were brought together, of course, to create pig iron. And of course, out of that raw material, the pig iron, you could then cast heavy iron goods such as boilers, cylinders for the newfangled steam engine, anchors. They became a big thing here in the Black Country, anvils even, which were exported in massive quantities to America. And in addition to that, smaller goods, which lighter though they were, tubes, I'm thinking of tubes, chain, were still heavy.
Was there quite a lot of resistance locally when the canals were first introduced?
Well, it depended who you were talking to. I mean, obviously there was opposition from landowners, but in terms of the industrialists, the commercial men, they wanted them. I mean, in a sense, without canals, the whole of the Black Country was log jammed. And with canals, you actually got the through an easy flow of goods across the region.
Can we talk a bit about the whole canal network? I mean, you've got fantastic goods made here,
right, yeah.
but Where do they go? How do they get out?
Well, that's a good,
they go around the world,
question.
don't they?
They did indeed. And in fact, a journey on a local canal was often the first leg of a journey that would take the goods, the finished products, for example, pots and pans made in West Bromwich, across the world to Australia and to South America and the United States.